Injury updates for Week 7 coming right up. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Gridiron Fantasy Football YouTube channel. I'm Chip. I'm the host of the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast, and today's Saturday, October 24, 2020. And on today's episode, I'm going to talk about all the injuries for Week 7. There's a lot of big names out this week that you may have to pivot to, to their backups or to other people on your roster. But before I do that, please hit subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any more episodes. And just like every Saturday, I go through all the injuries and try to give you my advice on who the players that can be active or inactive for that week, and players that you could pivot to just in case you need to do so. So with that being the case, I wanted to kind of touch base on an injury that took place on Thursday night. Desean Jackson, he got injured returning a punt, and the injury did not look very good. To my eyes, it looked like he had torn his ACL. Just the way his leg got twisted up when he got tackled, he grabbed his knee, so it gave me an indication that, okay, there's some type of knee injury that took place. However, he had his test done, and it looks like he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks based on having a non-displaced ankle fracture. So what that means that he fractured his ankle, but no bones were out of place. Everything was still aligned properly, but he's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. And when it comes to fantasy football, he's a drop candidate. He's no longer relevant in fantasy football because he's supposed to be back in Week 14. So that being the case, I don't see him being relevant to fantasy at all. Even if you make the playoffs, you probably already you're going to have your roster set for your playoff run and your championship run. So having Desean Jackson on your roster really is a wasted roster spot. So if you have Desean Jackson, go ahead and drop him because he's not going to be relevant anymore for fantasy. But hopefully he comes back, from his injury and helps the Eagles win, some more games. Hopefully the Eagles will be in the playoff hunt. So when he comes back in Week 14, hopefully he'll be a valued piece that can help them win some more games because he was having a good game on Thursday night. I mean, it seemed like every time I looked up, he was catching a ball, and he's definitely a weapon that Carson Wentz needs. So hopefully he gets himself right and comes back at Week 14. But just one of those things. I mean, that's the best case scenario for him. But hopefully he can beat that timeline and come back a little bit earlier. But it's one of those things. I mean, it's good that he had a fracture and not a lot of soft tissue damage because generally when you have soft tissue damage, that can take a lot longer to heal. But the fact that it was non-displaced, it's a good sign that he's going to miss time, but at least the recovery should be about that 6 to 8 week mark. But with that being said, let's go into some of the injury updates for Week 7. Now, the players that we know are going to be playing on Sunday, we know Sam Darnold's going to be in there. He was dealing with a rotator cuff injury. He took the last couple weeks off to heal up, recover, rehab. And we saw Joe Flacco in there as the quarterback or trying to play quarterback. And now that Sam Darnold's healthy, he should be in for Week 7. But when it comes to fantasy, he's not going to be a relevant player this week in fantasy unless you're playing in a 2-quarterback league and you have someone on a bye week and you have no one else you can fill up that roster spot with. But Sam Darnold is in for Sunday. And then at running back, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette should be active. Kareem Hunt is always designated with the injury tag throughout the week, and he gets taken off the injury report. That seems to be the popular thing that goes on this week or this year. So he's a good to go to play. Leonard Fournette, he's been dealing with an ankle injury. He's going to be active and playing in Week 7 as well. At wide receiver, the Pittsburgh Steelers are definitely going to get Deonte Johnson back this week. Now, this is a guy that I'm kind of concerned about when it comes to the upside of Chase Claypool, because as Deonte Johnson has been out, Chase Claypool has been booming in fantasy. So with that being the case, how does Chase Claypool continue his fantasy football upside based on now having Deonte Johnson back? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out tomorrow. But Deonte Johnson can be back. Keenan Allen is expected to play. He's been dealing with the back injury since the Monday night game, and so hopefully he's able to go. He's not going to have any type of recurring of the injury of his lower back, so hopefully he can play the full game. Jarvis Landry is going to be active. Now KJ Hamler, he's going to be active. He's been missing out the last few weeks, but he's going to come back in Week 7. Now they're playing the Chiefs, and apparently the Chiefs game is supposed to be played in snow, so I don't know how relevant KJ Hamler is going to be, but also that's going to hurt the upside of Tim Patrick, because Tim Patrick is one of the bigger waiver wire pickups at receiver because of just the production he's had in the last couple games. But with that being the case, it's a wait to see approach. But I think that if you're in deeper leagues and you have to play Tim Patrick, I think you still play him and Jerry Jeudy. But that's one thing. That's one of the things you just don't know exactly how someone coming off of injury, how effective they're going to be. And then when it comes to the New York Jets are getting the rookie wide receiver Denzel Mims back. So we haven't seen him all year. He's been injured the whole season. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Jets are able to do with Denzel Mims and Rashad Perriman being back. And then for the LA Rams, Robert Woods has been dealing with a groin injury, and he's at limited practice all week, but then he's been taken off the injury report, so he's good to go on Monday for this game against the Bears. However, I'm not sure how effective he will be based on what's the likelihood of re-injuring his groin, but also the Bears are very stingy when it comes to their pass defense. So they have not given up a lot of touchdowns to the wide receiver. So even if Robert Woods is playing, expect just a low floor just because of how good that Chicago defense has been. But it doesn't. A good thing to note that Khalil Mack may be out. He's been limited out of practice as well. So a lot of pieces there, but that's one of those things where I think that when we're playing Robert Woods, just have a low expectations, and if he scores you a touchdown, you're grateful for that. And when it comes to tight end, the Broncos are getting back Noah Fant. He's been missed the last few games because of an ankle injury. He's finally going to be back and good to go for Sunday. Same thing with Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith hurt his ankle early in the game last week. Looks like he's going to play. So, like I said, it's one thing to be active. The other thing to be how effective you're going to be. So, with that being the case, just have low expectations for Jonnu Smith. He's playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, so it's a tough defense, tough matchup. But he's active. He's on your roster. Unless you have a better pivot, you're probably going to play him and just hope for the best with Jonnu Smith. And for players that are definitely out for Week 5, this is a big name. So Aaron Jones, it looks like there's a high probability that he's not going to play. He's been dealing with a calf injury, and they were hopeful that he'd be able to suit up tomorrow, but it looks like there's a high percentage chance that he's not going to play. So if you have Jamal Williams or if you have A.J. Dillon on your free agency, I would pick him up just because we know that obviously they involve the running back. Jamal Williams is always involved based on already even with Aaron Jones instilled into the running game. Jamal Williams is always going to be somebody that's going to have some type of involvement. Now, is he going to get the workload? That's yet to be determined. So Jamal Williams is a big boom bust type of player this week because we don't know if they're going to use Jamal Williams more or A.J. Dillon. So if they're on your waiver wire, I would pick them up just in case it's an Aaron Jones injury that is going to be going up beyond this week. Get ahead of the waiver wires. Try to pick someone up that you can hopefully you can drop someone that's on the end of your bench and pick up maybe A.J. Dillon or Jamal Williams if they're available. But that's a big name with Aaron Jones being out. This is what happens on Saturday. You try to figure out what your roster is going to look like, and then you get these injuries that just kind of randomly come up, and then you're going to miss out on one of your stud running back. So just hopefully you're able to pivot to one of those guys if you need to. And then Joe Mixon, he's out. He's been dealing with a foot injury. He left week 6 at halftime due to a foot injury. He came back into the game, but it looks like obviously he's out for this week. Now Giovanni Bernard, he's going to be the guy who takes the workload. Now, he should be a guy that gets you, 10 to 20, carries per game. He's a guy that's good out of the backfield as a wide receiver. So, not sure how much he's definitely going to be a good flex RB2 type of running back. But I do think that if I had to choose between like Jamal Williams, A.J. Dillon, or Giovanni Bernard, who has the upside, obviously Giovanni Bernard has the upside because there's really no one behind him when it comes to taking some of the workload. So, that's the only thing about, the difference between the Giovanni Bernard situation compared to playing Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon. And then Raheem Mostert, he's out. He got put back on IR, so obviously he's on IR, so he's not playing this week. At wide receiver, Michael Thomas, he's going to be out. He's been dealing with a high ankle sprain from the beginning of the season. Then he was inactive due to having some conflict with his teammate, and then now he is going to be out because of a hamstring injury. So that's big news because Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are out for week 7. So that gives you, can you pivot to Traquan Smith? That may be a decent pivot. I think this helps obviously Jared Cook. It obviously, I think, gives us some, more touches and involvement with Alvin Kamara, even though he's already involved heavily into the offense. I think this gives him a little more. They're going against the Panthers, so I think like that's going to be a big game from those guys, just based on someone has to get the volume. And then in Buffalo, John Brown, he's out. He did not have a good game last week, and he's been dealing with an injury, so it's good to get him. Just let him rest up this week, get his stuff healed up, and then he comes back next week hopefully. And Sammy Watkins, he's been dealing with a hamstring injury, so he's out for this week as well. Now for the New York Jets, Jamison Crowder was now downgraded to doubtful, dealing with his injury. So, it was going to be fun to watch, what Sam Darnold would look like based on having Jamison Crowder, having Denzel Mims and Brashad Perriman as his wide receivers, and then having Chris Herndon as his tight end. But we're going to have to wait another week to kind of see how that plays out. But I do think that Sam Darnold's finally going to have enough weapons around him that hopefully gets that offense to kind of get to that point of being fantasy relevant. And then this is kind of a bummer that at tight end, Austin Hooper, he's out for this week. He had an emergency appendectomy, so he's going to be out for week 7 and possibly week 8. He was going to be a big streamer this week based on the matchup against Cincinnati. With that being the case, there's David Njoku, there's Harrison Bryant, who's the rookie tight end there. So if you want to try to do a high risk, high reward, if you don't have anybody else on your waiver wire for tight end, maybe you try to plug in one of those guys and hope for the best. But if I can play someone else other than David Njoku and Harrison Bryant, then I'm going to do that. And when it comes to the guys that are questionable and more probable to play, right now we have DeAndre Hopkins. He's been dealing with the ankle injury, but just like Kareem Hunt, he's always been designated on the injury report for the week. He has limited sessions at practice, but then he ends up playing. So I just think that's what it is. He's going to play on Sunday. Julian Edelman, same thing. He's been nicked up a little bit, so I think he still plays on Sunday. Same thing for Laviska Shenault Jr., the wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, he's been dealing with a hamstring injury for the last few weeks. He's always had a injury designation for each week, but then he plays and he produces. He did have a bad game last week, but he's still going to be active. It's not going to affect your fantasy roster one bit. And then when it comes to being questionable in game time decisions, so Justin Jackson, this is kind of a new injury that has taken place. So Justin Jackson has been dealing with the injury, and it looks like he is not going to play tomorrow. They're going to test it out, kind of see how he does. But it looks like as of right now, they had called up Tremaine Pope from the practice squad, another running back. So it looks like when you always see a team bring up somebody from the practice squad that's at the position of someone with an injury, you have to have a chance to kind of dissect that and try to pivot if you need to, because this could be where Jackson gets inactive. He can try to test out before the game, and he can't go. And then, obviously Joshua Kelly becomes the starter there, and then Tremaine Pope becomes the backup. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, tomorrow. But it's one of those things where if you have Justin Jackson, just completely just try to pay attention to all the injury news before and see if he's inactive or active for week 7. And then Green Bay Packers tight end Robert Tonyan, he's been dealing with the calf and foot injury. It looks like he's going to try to test it out as well, but it looks like he's going to play. But have a pivot ready just in case he is inactive. That's it for today's episode. That's all the injury updates for week 7. Now, if you have any other questions, you can always leave a comment below. If you have any questions about the injuries, start-sit advice, you can always, like I said, leave a comment below, and I'll get to those questions as fast as I can. If you'd like to email me, you can email me at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com. But, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to support the show, please hit subscribe. And on Monday, I'll be going over all my reactions to the Week 7 games, plus all the fantasy studs for Week 7. So good luck this week. Hopefully you're able to pick up that win. And I'll see you guys on Monday's episode. Take care.